What's up guys, welcome back to another GGF video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Thermaltake Level 20 GT RGB chassis. Now I've already done a time-lapse build on this case, so if you haven't seen that, I'll chuck it up here or down below in the description for you to check out. Now this is probably my favorite case so far in the Level 20 lineup, probably because it does sport a brand new internal chassis. There's quite a few little new features, as in the PSU shroud, the vertical GPU mount and so on. So let's jump in and check them all out. For our third case in our Level 20 coverage, we'll be taking a look at the Thermaltake Level 20 GT RGB. Unlike the two previous cases we've already looked at, the VT and the XT, the Level 20 GT sports a complete new chassis from top to bottom. The new internal chassis is welcomed with some nice touches while keeping that external Level 20 theme. But for me, I feel the major letdown in the Level 20 GT is front ventilation, and I feel it's one of the worst in this era in the entire Level 20 lineup. Front ventilation gaps run up and down each side of the front but aren't even a finger's width in size, but they are filtered. The Level 20 GT RGB comes with two 200mm RGB fans installed in between the chassis and this front panel. I highly recommend removing these and installing them on the inside of the chassis to help with airflow. Also, there is a gap at the bottom of the front panel for air intake as well. In the front, you'll be able to fit up to a 360 or 420mm radiator. 60mm radiators will fit no worries at all. I also like how Thermaltake have kept the drain port at the very bottom front of the chassis. With that out of the way, let's take a look at some of the new features in the GT. First off, and probably the most striking, is the half-length PSU shroud. This shroud is also removable, which is a nice touch. To me, I've always thought half-length PSU shrouds just don't really look right in cases, but I also feel they do provide more flexibility in the case. For example, in the GT, having a half-length shroud allows us to easily run up to a 360 or 420mm radiator at the front or the side. Also, up to a 240mm radiator is supported at the bottom. Hard drive support is also better, as the cages can be installed much lower to the bottom of the case. And lastly, having only a half-length shroud allows for better reservoir and pump insulation around the front area of the chassis. The shroud also has an acrylic window in it to showcase your selected power supply. We also see room for one SSD up the top and ventilation for your PSU fan if your unit is flipped around. Another new feature is the redesigned vertical GPU bracket. Unlike traditional brackets, the one in the GT actually goes in the space where your standard PCI slots are, instead of after your PCI slots jammed up against the side panel like in most cases. This bracket works well and the design is simple. If you want your GPU installed horizontal, you just leave it as is. For vertical layout, the whole PCI slot area is rotated 90 degrees and screwed back in. No extra brackets or braces are required. Having the vertical GPU bracket in this area has a few benefits. One, the bracket comes ready for up to 2 GPUs. Mind you, you'll need to purchase the riser cable separately. And two, if using one GPU, you have the flexibility to move it closer or further away from the side panel for better GPU cooling. I'm also glad we have a good, sturdy bracket for your GPU bus support. Unlike on some cases I've seen where your GPU is just hanging, there were no issues with sag here. Jumping back to the outside of the chassis, you'll find 4mm tempered glass all around with a medium tint to it. Both side panels are hinged and are held in by very strong magnets, probably the strongest I've seen on a case before. But if that's not enough for you, both side panels can be locked as well. I'm not sure if this is 100% required, but just make sure you don't lose the supplied keys. The side panels can also be removed if needed. Taking a look around the top, we see a very similar design as the front, all tempered glass with two fine rows for exhausting air. Fans can fit in between this cover and the chassis, but I do recommend installing them inside the chassis. The top panel also comes with a removable dust filter. Radiator support up the top is good, and I find the removable radiator bracket handy. Rad sizes are marked on the bracket, and the bracket is pushed all the way to the main side of the case. Up to 420 or 360mm radiators are supported up the top, and 60mm thick 360 radiators will fit no problem at all with fans on the inside. If using a 420 60mm thick radiator, fans will have to be installed up inside the top cover. Due to a 420 radiator being wider, you may encounter RAM clearance issues with fans being installed on the inside of the chassis. Inside there's room for up to EATEX motherboards, but cable routing holes are nearly all covered when using EATX boards. To the right of the motherboard is support for up to 420 or 360mm radiators on the side. As cool as this position looks for a radiator, I don't find it very practical as all exhausting air is blowing straight into the rear side panel. There really isn't any proper exhaust for this side radiator. Also to note, when using a side or front mounted radiator, you can't have them both installed at once. It's either one or the other. Storage options are decent with the GT, coming pre-installed with 2 drive cages, each holding 2 3.5-inch drives or SSDs. If for some reason you need to remove these cages for say an LCS setup, Thermaltake have a few extra storage locations around the back. You can fit 3 3.5-inch drives or 3 SSDs behind the back of the chassis, and also there's that one SSD location on the top of the PSU shroud. Front I/O is interesting as it's split on each side of the chassis. On the main side we see audio ports, reset button, hard drive LED and power switch with built-in power LED. On the other side there's a USB 3.1 Type-C port, dual USB 3.0 and dual USB 2.0. As much as I like this idea of splitting the I/O up, just keep a note that if you have a device like say a headset that requires both USB and 3.5mm audio connectivity, you'll need to run it to both sides of the case. Now taking a look at price for the case, we're looking at $289 and that is for the RGB Plus version, which is the one that I received here. Now do bear in mind that does come with 3 RGB fans. You get 2 200mm RGB fans that come on the front, and you get the 140mm RGB fan at the rear. And if you don't want to go with the RGB option, Thermaltake does have a non-RGB version that doesn't come with these RGB fans pre-installed, and that is about $100 less. So keep that in mind when you are interested in picking up this case, that you don't pick up the wrong one if you are going to be using your own RGB fans. Now, other aspects of the case, really pretty much the only downside I didn't like on this case is of course the front airflow. As you saw previously, it is very restrictive, so keep that in mind. If you are using this case for a high airflow build, you may have to look at bringing up air from the bottom because it does support fans at the bottom of the chassis, so just keep that in mind. And also I guess the front I/O being split, some on some side, some on the other side. I did have some feedback in the time-lapse build from people thinking that it was a bit weird to have some of your I/O on the right and some of your I/O on the left. So if you do have devices that uses USB and audio, you will have to split them up on each side. Now let's take a look at the build I did. Certainly something a little bit different. Once again, not the best build for airflow as I have covered the whole top of the chassis, but I just wanted to do something to show you what you can do in this case and do something a little bit different. So really my only terms of exhaust airflow is out the back through the 140mm fan, as I've got all the tubing running through pass-throughs up the top, and then as you saw in the top, it does sort of all connect in and then run back down. So it is something a little bit different. And I also did make the panel at the top that everything passes through. I made that RGB as well. So basically I just made a luminous RGB panel and I just stuck it as blue LED to match with the rest of the build. But yeah, really nice case. I do like the new features, especially the PSU shroud is multifunctional. A lot of cases have PSU shrouds just for looks. This one does serve quite a few purposes, and also the new vertical GPU mount, the fact that it can hold multiple GPUs, you can go horizontal, it can go vertical, you can put your GPUs all the way back to the motherboard or all the way forward is really nice. So yeah, really nice case. I want to thank Thermaltake for sending this out. I want to thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for next time.